The Australian Financial Review.
There's just about nothing better on a cold winter morning than a hot bowl of porridge. I like to start by chopping up the banana and the pear. Then I go to the pantry, get my oats out, pour them into the saucepan, add a bit of milk, fire up the gas and bring it to the boil. And within a few minutes, you've got a beautiful hearty breakfast to start your day. If you're like me and you like to start your day with a bowl of oats, then you're going to love this story. Just as your breakfast gives you power to get through your day, some clever folks have worked out how to get porridge power on a mass scale. The world's first oat-fired power station is now complete in a quiet corner of South Australia. It generates carbon neutral power 24 hours a day, 7 days a week through a process that's not much different to your breakfast.
Fundamentally, what these are giant mechanical stomachs. When I explain this to anyone, it's actually a relatively simple process. It's the same microbes that are going on in your stomach that we're actually producing in here.
Everyone knows we need to do something about climate change, but what's not clear is how do we fix it?
Of low emissions technologies.
There is net zero modelling.
Change is coming whether you like it or not.
Change isn't just coming, it's already underway. We're living through a massive industrial revolution where just about everything we do is going to have to change in less than 3 decades. Empires are going to crumble and fortunes are going to be made. I'm Peter Kerr from the Carbon Challenge team at the Australian Financial Review, and this is Tech Zero. It's a podcast about the big green ideas that could get us to net zero and the inspiring people who are putting their heart and soul into making them work. Today, we're taking you to Bordertown, a farming community about 3 hours east of Adelaide. Civic pride around here is heavily invested in one man. Robert James Lee Hawke, you probably know him as Bob Hawke, was born and spent the early years of his childhood here before going on to become Australia's 23rd Prime Minister.
I tell you what, any boss who sacks anyone for not turning up to die is a bum.
His childhood home is a tourist attraction and banners of his smiling face hang from street lights around town. But the citizens of Bordertown now have something else to hang their hat on. The world's first power station that runs on oat waste. It's been built beside the local oat mill.
Where we are located close to the border, we're part of the SA electricity network, but we're at the end of the line. So basically it comes out from the city, stars out to all the regional areas from there.
That was the mill's project manager, Jeremy Neal. As you can hear, there was lots of noise and activity behind us. On the day we were there, we interrupted some welders. They were fabricating a pipe for one of the really big silos that house the oats. So Jeremy was telling us that the power station was an innovation that was driven by a problem.
So we're at the end of the line. We're on a sub line from Keith to Bordertown, which has a certain amount of capacity. And Bordertown's been at that limit for quite a long time. We're pretty well maxed out on our power usage. Being at the end of that line, to get more power to site, which will allow for expansion, is very difficult to do because the town just doesn't have that capacity.
Now the Australian energy market operator is shedding more light on the events which caused South Australia to plunge into darkness.
I had this idea that there was like a period of time where it was 2015 or something where you guys got hit by a bunch of blackouts or something.
Absolutely, yeah, we did. That was probably a little bit later than that, but yeah, SA had a fair hit of blackouts there for a little while. There was lots of contributors to that. One of them was the big storms that come through and wiped out a lot of power lines. We probably weren't hit by that too bad, but it did highlight the fact that we are susceptible to power outages, and if we were to be out of power for some time, it's quite difficult. Plus, those small, short power outages cause a lot of pain in our facility. Shutting mills down while they're fully operational at 100% capacity, they shut down instantly in a power outage, and it's not the easiest thing to get back up and going. So even if the power's only out for 30 seconds, the flow-on effect as far as our production goes is quite significant after that event.
The Bordertown Mill is Australia's biggest producer of rolled oats. So if you eat porridge or muesli bars, chances are your oats passed through here. Now, I love oats. So visiting this mill was for me a bit like when Charlie Bucket got the golden ticket to go to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory.
Come on, Charlie. Hold on to that ticket.
There weren't any Oompa Loompas and we weren't able to dive into any giant pools of porridge. But there was a series of peculiar machines that shook, spun and rotated in a bid to free the oat from the husk it grew in. Now please excuse the noise in this next bit. We were right in the heart of the mill's operations.
So in this part of the factory that we're in, there are 3 different machines effectively breaking up the oat and separating. And my favourite one is over in the distance where it looks like these machines are dancing. They're connected from the roof by pipes, and the pipes go into the floor, and about waist height there's like things that almost look like about the size of a 6-year-old child that's shaking side to side as if they're at a disco. These machines are amazing.
Once separated from the valuable oat, the husk and dust used to be either sent to landfill or sold to farmers as cattle feed. But a biogas expert named Joe Oliver from DeLorean Corporation saw potential in the husk and dust.
Hi, I'm Joe Oliver from DeLorean Corporation. I'm the Managing Director, and we're making change by collecting energy from waste through a biological process.
He came up with a plan to use this waste product to solve the mill's power problem.
Anaerobic digestion is a mature technology that's been around for hundreds of years. It's the biological breakdown of volatile matter or food, basically, that breaks down in your stomach. So similar to a cow's stomach, your stomach, and we just do that through a mechanical gut for energy production.
All that digestion gives off gases like methane and carbon dioxide. Now those gases can be captured and burned to create power. In his career, Joe has created power by digesting lots of different types of organic material. But before Bordertown, he had never done it with oat waste, and nor had anyone else for that matter. Was there ever a time where you feared the Bordertown plant would not work based on the feedstock of the oat husk and dust?
Always a fear. I think whenever you're doing something new, it's the first of its kind in the world at this commercial scale, with energy being offtake behind the meter to a mill. So yes, look, it was an R&D exercise, but at the same time, we'd done a lot of testing before we understood that the property could be broken down. We could capture the gas and generate a large-scale system. We've done a lot of research into everything from red dirt in Western Australia to biosecurity wastes of dog biscuits, supermarket shelf waste, through to different types of grease traps and wool from sheep processing facilities.
What was the key question that you had to answer to work out if this feedstock could work?
As a monoculture, it's all about what the trace elements are in that material to enable the different nutritional value to break down and to keep a healthy gut, basically. So if you think about yourself, you eat vegetables, meats, different sugars and everything else to have that balanced diet. As a monoculture, it was really what is in that balanced diet of that material from a trace element perspective to ensure that we've got a good, reliable, healthy gut with the process. What we found from a commercial scale, and this is very hard to identify, that you're going to, from one sample of, let's say, a kilo of thousands of tons of product, that you're going to have that reputability of sample, of trace elements, of nutritional value that enables that healthy gut. So that was always the concern, that material could change, that it might not supply us with the right trace elements that enable that healthy gut. And to date, we've seen a relatively healthy gut surviving on that monoculture, because in the dust, there's a lot of sugars, carbohydrates, there's different proteins. It's got a full suite of trace elements that enables that breakdown of product for renewable energy.
I don't mean to embarrass you, but just as the digestion process in your stomach generates methane and carbon dioxide, so does Joe's plant at Bordertown. Those gases are captured and burned to generate electricity in a combined heat plant. or CHP, which is really just a small power station that they've built next to the mill.
It's actually running right now, so you can hear there's very little noise off these units. They're incredibly well manufactured.
That's Joe's project manager, Ross Merchant. He took us around the site for a tour and even gave us a look inside the CHP. I couldn't believe how loud it was on the inside.
So when we go through that door, I'm going to open that door and we're all going to get through that door as quick as we possibly can, okay? Because I don't want to shut down the generator from that side. I'm just going to open this, we're going to run through and we're going to jump in. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
The power station's now generating about 1.5 times what the mill needs. That means they've got power left over to sell back into the grid.
We'll pick some rough numbers on this plant. That CHP is a 1200 kilowatt CHP. Okay, that's what it's capable of producing. This site roughly uses around 800 kilowatts, okay? So we export about 400 kilowatts to the grid from that site. Now that ramps up and down depending on their production. They don't run their hammer mill at the weekend, so quite often you'll find it'll drop to 200-300 kilowatts. Now, what it does, it gives them the ability to secure their power without depending on the grid. Now, if they're producing their own power, the grid goes down, doesn't really matter. What happens is we island the site and we now produce our own power from there. When the grid comes back on, now we reconnect to the grid.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Methane's not a clean source of power. In fact, it's 28 times worse for the atmosphere than carbon dioxide. But Joe is adamant the methane he's burning at Bordertown is carbon neutral. More on that after the break. Do you guys consider gas that you produce at Bordertown to be a renewable? When most people think about renewables, they think about solar and wind, but do you guys consider your products renewables?
Yeah, 100%. So we get large-scale generation certificates. It is classed as renewable because what we're doing is we're utilising a product which is an organic product that we're able to break down that has consumed greenhouse gas emissions, CO2. We're able to break that down in an enclosed environment and offset fossil fuel generation. So yes, 100%. It's a net zero carbon emission by the offset of fossil fuel consuming organics that have broken down through an internal process.
If you want to understand how biogas can be carbon neutral while it releases methane into the atmosphere, you need to start by imagining a plant. As that plant grows, it sucks carbon out of the atmosphere. When we harvest it, put it in our biogas power station, the same amount of carbon that was sucked out of the atmosphere gets released back into the atmosphere. The next year's crop sucks an equivalent amount of carbon back out of the air, and the cycle continues. That's why Joe argues this is a circular cycle of carbon neutrality. So there's no net gain of carbon to the atmosphere. The same can't be said for the gas that we produce out of fossil fuels. That stuff typically is unlocked from geology deep underground, and it ends up in the atmosphere after we burn it. Now that's a linear journey for the carbon from point A to point B, not a circular journey. Joe reckons biogas could even be considered carbon negative if it replaces fossil fuels in our power grid, because that's some carbon emissions that are being avoided.
The baseload power that anaerobic digestion can provide, as opposed to, I guess, solar and wind, we produce energy 24/7 as opposed to when the sun shines or the wind blows, effectively.
Biogas producers had a win earlier this year when the former Morrison government tweaked the rules in a way that made it easier for them to claim Australian carbon credit units. If you're not familiar with the carbon credit scheme, it's where the government gives a certificate to a business for storing or avoiding 1 tonne of carbon emissions. On the other hand, businesses that exceed their emissions limits are forced to go and buy those same certificates to get their carbon footprint back under control. So the certificates end up having value. In June this year, the certificates were worth between 30 and 35 Australian dollars for each tonne of carbon stored.
There's a lot of work that's happening now around carbon credits, and I think it's just putting a carbon credit to every organic waste stream that's been able to be used for energy production and recognising that there's a carbon offset. I think at the minute we support the landfill gas side, and we don't support as much the diversion of organics from landfill into similar facilities. So we've got to level the playing field there to enable more capture of carbon credits.
While using oat waste as a feedstock for the Bordertown power station was a world first, don't fall into the trap of thinking that Australia is a leader on biogas. We're definitely not. In fact, we are a laggard. Over in Europe, they're miles ahead of us. That became abundantly clear to Jeremy Neal when he went to Europe before they committed to building the plant at Bordertown.
Germany, there's 14,000 of these types of plants, not running on oat husk. They might have a bit of oat husk fed into them, mainly running on corn. They grow a lot of energy crops over in Germany. But these facilities are scattered around everywhere. I went to Germany to understand a bit more about these, and I think we went and visited 3 plants, and on the tour to visit 3 plants, we probably drove past 10. To drive past 10 of this type of plant in Australia is impossible. You'd literally have to drive from Sydney to Perth to see 2 or 3. Totally. So, it's really exciting for our staff to see something this innovative in Australia.
Joe got his start in the British biogas industry, and he agrees that Australia has not made nearly as much use of its waste for biogas.
Yeah, there's sort of 700 facilities in the UK that's processing food waste or organic waste, and that's everything from ag residues through to food scraps. Europe, there's probably over 10,000 facilities across in Europe processing everything from ag residues through to food scraps as well. So there's probably less than 5 operating in the commercial industrial space processing waste diverting from landfill, but there's probably 50 sites nationally that are wastewater treatment through to piggery waste capture.
If you've been reading the Financial Review over the past year, you'll be well aware that we have an energy crisis in this country. The big East Coast cities were being asked in June to curb non-essential power consumption to avoid blackouts amid severe pressure on the national electricity grid. Fossil fuels like gas and coal are in extremely short supply. Prices are astronomical, and there's signs that governments might be starting to think about asking producers to stop exporting and send the product to domestic consumers. Yet, amid this shortage of gas, we don't seem to be capitalising on the huge potential resource we have within our food scraps, our garden waste, our agricultural waste, and all the other sources of biogas. A 2019 report found that biogas could provide 9% of this nation's energy needs, but was actually providing less than 1%.
There's over 50 million tonnes of organic waste, basically, that's produced in Australia every year. 12.5 million tonnes of that is actually food waste from residents, from C&I processors, and the remaining is agricultural residues from fisheries and agriculture. So there's a huge volume of waste that can be captured for energy production.
To process 50 million tonnes of organic waste a year using power stations the size of the one at Bordertown, we're going to need 5,000 of them.
We're seeing fertiliser and energy prices really hit us hard, and there's a lot of talk about food shortages, there's a lot of talk about gas shortages, and when you look at this system, this is part of the answer, basically.
I don't know about you, but the amount of food we waste at my house is shocking. It's not deliberate, but with toddlers in the house, there's plenty of meals that get rejected and plenty more that are embraced but, dropped on the floor. In our neighbourhood, the food scraps and garden waste go together in a green bin that gets collected on Thursday mornings, around the same time as the Carbon Challenge newsletter drops into the inbox of subscribers. But I digress. Could the food scraps in our green bins rescue Australia from our short-term gas price crisis? And could they help us get to net zero by 2050? I asked Joe about this. The plant that I saw in Bordertown was not that big, and every local council in Australia has its own different waste system, and they all have the trucks come around on a different day. Is it realistic to think that, say by 2050, we could have a plant similar to what I saw in Bordertown in every local council?
100%, yeah. And I think that's what we're really pushing for, is to have a rollout of AD facilities or bioenergy facilities nationally that captures those organic waste, and that infrastructure's there. So it's a 30-year plus life, and let's use it for what it's designed for.
And did you say the capital cost of the Bordertown facility was roughly $8 million?
Yeah, that's right, yep.
So, I mean, it's not big dollars for a council.
No, it's not. And yeah, the rollout nationally is something that we're really focused on.
So would it help your industry really get rolling in Australia if in homes like mine there was one bin for food scraps and a separate bin for garden waste?
Yes, that would help. I think it's the infrastructure that's needed, the bioenergy facilities nationally, to be able to process that material, capture that material. That takes time. So yes, we can change the colour of a bin and put it outside somebody's house tomorrow, but we need to be able to process that material.
One thing that deters our councils from making energy out of our household green waste is the fact that most of us aren't very good at following the rules about what things can and can't go in each bin.
If we take the green bin scenario, there's quite a bit of contamination in there, from batteries to engine parts to, you name it, basically. And we have to remove that from the organics to be able to process that in this process.
Those little stickers they put on apples must really, really irritate you in this context, hey?
Yeah, completely. I think the more that we can move away from plastic, the better. And, we need to be moving into a position where we've got biodegradable material that can be processed in an anaerobic digestion.
If there's one little contaminant that, you could get rid of tomorrow that, is quite common in contaminating the sorts of feedstocks you might use for biogas, is it the sort of plastic bottle tops? Is that the most common thing, or is it something else that comes to mind?
Oh, there's probably three. I think you've touched on two of them. So plastic bottle tops and apple stickers, and the other one is the elastic bands that they put around fruit and veg to group them. So I think if we can get away from those three elements from a contamination perspective, we'll be in a lot better position. When the contamination is larger, it's easier to remove, but an apple sticker, very small, very difficult to. You can't have people peeling apple stickers off before it goes into the process. So that's a couple of key areas.
And to the average person at home, how can they help deliver change? What can they do?
Segregation of waste is always key. So utilising the bins for what they're for, which is separating the organics out, ensuring that there's no plastics, other contamination in there. I guess being mindful of what you eat. Whilst we want to capture the waste, we don't want to waste.
And so the world wants to be net zero by 2050. Where do you see your industry in 2050?
I mean, here we are, 2022. We're starting to see a lot of big change from an ESG perspective. I think we'll be a long way in 2050. I think we're only on the start of the curve that I guess Europe and the rest of the world have seen. And we can really push that from an Australian perspective around capturing organics for energy production. So I think we'll be a long way ahead by then. I think it'd be quite naive to say that we could build 1,000 facilities and that would completely eradicate the need for fossil fuel. But I think every facility that we build helps to contribute towards that goal of the circular economy, the sustainability of capturing energy from waste.
Thanks for listening to Tech Zero. Join us next week when we talk to the Australian who's been headhunted by big European car manufacturers to help reclaim the critical minerals they need for electric vehicles. If you like the show and you'd like to hear more, follow us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And consider giving us a review or a rating, as it helps others to find us. This podcast was hosted and written by me, Peter Kerr. Produced and edited by Lap Fan. Technical production by Cormac Lally and Rob Fletcher. The artwork was by Yerevan Delanchian. And we want to say a special thanks to the Sydney Morning Herald and the Age video and audio teams, as well as 6PR radio station in Perth. This podcast was executively produced by Fiona Buffini. At the Australian Financial Review, we investigate the big stories about markets, business and power. You can subscribe to the Financial Review at afr.com/subscribe. If you want to get in touch with us at Tech Zero, you can email us at techzero@afr.com. Tech Zero is part of the Financial Review's Carbon Challenge franchise.
The Australian Financial Review.